Hello everyone, welcome to this second FREVUE webinar on the theme of environmental benefits of electric freight vehicles. My name is Thomas Mouret. I work for a network of cities called Polis, and I am responsible for communication activities for the FREVUE project. Today we'll have an interesting webinar with two speakers. First of all, we'll have a presentation of the project by our project coordinator, Tanja Dalle-Muenchmeyer. Hello, Tanja. And we will also have the main presentation about the environmental benefits of electric freight made by Yanjie from Imperial College of London. And then we will have some time for questions and answers from your side, from the participants. So here you can see the program as I just described. Just before we start with the presentation, I would like to give a few information about the format of this webinar. So this is a Skype for Business webinar. It is recorded and it will be made available on our website after the end of the call. If you have questions or if you have problems with connecting your audio or any other technical problem, you can ask a question via the chat, and we'll make our best to respond to your questions. And towards the end of this call, we'll have 15 to 20 minutes for questions from your side. So you can either use the chat box or we will give you the microphone so you can ask a question to one of our two speakers of today. So I will now hand over to Tanja for the introduction of the FREVUE project. Tanja, over to you.
Yes, good morning. I hope you can all hear me okay. Thank you very much, Thomas, for this introduction and for organizing this webinar. So as the FREVUE coordinator, I will just provide you with a very brief overview and introduction to the project to provide a bit of background to the discussion on environmental benefits that Yanjie from Imperial College will lead on a little bit later. So FREVUE stands, as it says there on the slide, for Freight Electric Vehicles in Urban Europe. This is a 4.5-year project that is actually coming to an end next week Thursday. So 4.5 years later now we are starting to present our results. It is FP7 funded with a total project budget of 14 million euros and funding of just under 8 million euros. So we've worked very hard over the last 4.5 years to make it the project worthwhile of this big amount of funding. At the outset of the project, we knew that fully electric vans and trucks, so that's what we call electric freight vehicles, could significantly contribute to addressing local air pollution, but also CO2 emissions. But there was very little information out there on these vehicles, how they operate, would they be technically reliable, how easily would it be to integrate them into daily operations for fleet managers. What about the economics? Can you actually construct a positive business case about these vehicles, and so on. So there were many questions and very little information out there. So the objective really of the FREVUE project was to deploy electric vans and trucks across various European cities. So we have the 8 European cities here on this slide. I don't know if you can see them, so I will read them out. So that's Amsterdam, Lisbon, London, Madrid, Milan, Oslo, and then Rotterdam and Stockholm. And it's not only that we had European funding and therefore we had to involve various European cities, but the advantage of having these involved is also that we could trial these vehicles across different climates, so very cold Oslo in winter and very hot summers in Madrid and Lisbon, for example, which really has an impact on battery and vehicle performance and so on, but also to trial vehicles across different policy environments. So what does that do, for example, for the business case for these vehicles? So overall, the underlying objective is really to underpin the future uptake of these vehicles and then to provide evidence for potential future policy intervention. So this is just a brief overview of our consortium. It's in total 32 partners, and we've been very lucky to have a great consortium of partners. Each what we call city demonstrator was led by a city authority, which you see here on the left, and then the logistics partners in the middle would deploy the vehicles with the support of all the other partners around here. So, yeah, thank you. So these are just images of a few of the FREVUE vehicles, just to give you, there's one more, Tanja. Yeah, thank you. Of the vehicles that we have deployed in the project, it's a total of 80 vehicles. We received data for more than that. So Yanjie will talk about that, just over 100, but we co-financed just over 80 of these vehicles, ranging from small car-derived vans of under 3.5 tons, all the way up to fully electric 18.5-ton trucks that you can see here on the right. Important also that these various vehicles carried very different goods. So importantly, refrigerated and non-refrigerated goods. So we are showing that fully electric refrigerated good transportation is possible. In our case, the refrigerated goods were pharmaceuticals. Then also post and parcel, food and drink, retail, waste, and others. We go to the next slide. Thank you. So I'm bringing together findings of 4.5 projects on one slide so that we can go on to Yanjie's presentation. So behind each of these points, there's probably about 250 pages of report if you want to look into any more detail on any of these points. But just to give you an overview of what we have found. And the first point, clearly, very importantly, is that the vehicles are actually technically and operationally suitable for most urban freight operations. And the best sign probably is that most of the operators that were involved in the project and they have trialed a few vehicles within the project have then gone on and procured more of these vehicles. So they have enlarged their fully electric fleet based on their positive experience under FREVUE. So that's probably one of the most encouraging signs from the project. And then as a sub-point here, we are finding that actually the range that is currently available is sufficient for most urban operations. Now, we get mixed messages on this, because at the same time we hear from operators, fleet managers, they consistently ask for more range, but we are actually finding that the range is sufficient, and that also shows in the FREVUE surveys. Sorry. So, for example, at the beginning, before the trial, only 6% of the respondents said that they would be happy with a range of under 100 kilometers. But after the survey, after the trial, this increased to 50%. So now 50% of respondents were actually happy with a range of under 100 kilometers. So we are finding that the range is sufficient for most operations indeed. In terms of business case, again, I'm really simplifying things here, but overall we are saying that you can get to positive business case quite easily now for vehicles under 3.5 tons. They are OEM produced in most cases. They are readily available on the market. For larger vehicles that remain largely retrofits, this is more difficult. We are seeing absolutely that for trucks of about 7.5 tons, there are several operators that do get to a positive business case. Some also do for even larger vehicles, so 12 tons. For the 18-ton trucks, it is still difficult to get to a positive business case. In terms of attitudes, and that's again some analysis that Imperial College have done, and I briefly mentioned the surveys already earlier. The important point here is that attitudes towards electric freight vehicles change over time when these vehicles are in operation, and they change for the better. So fleet managers, drivers, and other involved stakeholders are far more positive about these vehicles after about 12 months of trial than they are initially. So to give you another example, at the beginning of the trial, talking to fleet managers, only 39% of fleet managers thought that electric freight vehicles would be a viable alternative to the diesel ones that they had prior to that. And that percentage increased to 72. So from 39 to 72% after the trial that then thought, actually, we have tried these vehicles and we are very happy with them, and we now actually think they are viable alternatives to the diesel freight vehicles we had beforehand. So again, very encouraging results. Now, so overall, we are saying, so these vehicles are technically and operationally super suitable. The environmental benefits are significant, which Yanjie will talk about in a minute. A positive business case is difficult for the larger vehicles, so we still do need policy support, and some governance changes within the companies are required. So we say local authorities can play a major role in supporting electric freight vehicles, and that can be both in terms of monetary and non-monetary, so operational support. But now I hand over to Yanjie for a discussion on the environmental benefits. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Tanja. It's indeed a perfect transition between the overall presentation of the project and now Yanjie's presentation on the environmental results of the project. Yanjie, I hand over to you now.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining today's webinar. Also, thanks to Thomas and Tanja for the organizing the webinar and the introduction. My name is Yanjie Dong, and I'm a researcher based at the Center for Transport Studies at Imperial College London. For the next 20 minutes or so, I'll be presenting some of the work we have done on the FREVUE project for the evaluations of the environmental impact of electric freight vehicles in urban logistics. I should mention that for this project, the Imperial team is mainly consist of Professor John Pollack and myself, with some inputs and thoughts from other colleagues as well. Our roles on the project not only include the environmental analysis presented today, but also the analysis of attitudinal impacts of deploying EFVs, as well as acting as a lead for the analysis and evaluation work package. So for today's presentation, they are basically extracted from the FREVUE deliverable 3.3, systemic transport and environmental impact of electric freight vehicles in logistics. Because of the time limitation, I've only included some headline results. So if anyone's interested in detailed analysis and figures, I would suggest to go through the report, which has already been approved by the Commission and will be published soon on the FREVUE website. So for today's session, here's a list of things I would like to cover. First of all, I want to briefly discuss the role freight transport plays in urban air quality and greenhouse gas emissions. Then I'll go through the analysis we have done on the project. In fact, there are 3 levels, including direct environmental impact assessment, which is level 1, potential benefits at a wider uptake level, which is level 2, and level 3 impact monetization. I'll explain this in details later in the presentation. Last, I want to discuss about the lessons learned from the FREVUE experience. Okay, first of all, the air quality issues and greenhouse gas emissions have been a hot topic for a number of years, and lots of research has been done in these areas, especially on the effect from passenger cars. Emissions from goods vehicles were relatively under-researched, especially at the start of the project in 2013. So in this slide, we touch on the role of freight transport in urban air quality and greenhouse gas emissions. I use London here as an example, but I think the observations generally apply in most major urban cities. As you can see on the slide, in 2013, for the Greater London area, road transport contributed to about half of the total NOx and more than half of the total PM emissions. Out of these road transport emissions, road freight traffic, including both light goods vehicles, LGV, and heavy goods vehicles. HGV is responsible for about 1/3 of NOx emissions and 1/4 of PM emissions. In addition, although the total level of traffic volumes in the Greater London area has decreased almost year on year since 2000, the proportion of goods traffic has actually, in fact, been growing during this period, mainly because of the increased popularities of online shopping and e-commerce. So to tackle urban air quality issues, freight traffic is really one of the very important factors, and its importance is growing over time. Looking at the whole picture for the EU 28 countries, well, thanks to the improved engine and emission control technologies, there has been a continued reduction of main air pollutants from the transport sector for the past 2 decades. But in urban area, because of the population density, so air pollutants can still cause very serious damage to humans' health. Also, transport-related greenhouse gas emissions have actually increased over the same periods. These are mainly due to the increased traffic flows, and it remains very challenging to be reduced. So electric freight vehicles with the zero tailpipe emissions, potentially a very attractive solution to the environmental issues in urban logistics. So FREVUE provides us an opportunity to explore this evidence in a real-world setting to quantify this benefit. So for this analysis, we are really trying to answer these 3 questions. So the first question is, what are the direct systemic and environmental impact from FREVUE demonstration activities? Although there are around 100 electric freight vehicles deployed in the project, while comparing to the number of freight vehicles in each of the cities, the scale is actually very limited. So the second question is trying to address this problem by asking what are the likely impacts if there is a different market penetration level. And the third question is focusing on analyzing the wider economic benefits from the deployment of electric freight vehicles. This is different from our colleague Tian's work on economic analysis, where they look at the costs and benefits from a logistic operator's point of view. Our emphasis here is to see whether it's possible, and if so, how to monetize the wider systemic and environmental benefits. So the results can be used by the policymakers as a basis for developing, for example, incentives to encourage the uptake of EFVs. So the targeted audience include policymakers and logistic operators, where you can see the difference they can make to the environment, and also public, where the idea is to raise their awareness of the potential benefits that can be achieved by electrifying logistic fleet, and more importantly, the differences their choice of operators collectively can make by using logistic companies which operate electric freight vehicles. So to answer those 3 questions, we have proposed a 3-level analysis. So the first level is the direct impact estimation, and the purpose to measure and quantify the direct environmental impact as a result of FREVUE demonstration activities. So we have collected the vehicle operational data together with other research partners from every demonstrators of the project. Hence, it's possible to carry out a very detailed analysis for all vehicles. And the second level is to use traffic modeling to assess the impact at different EFV penetration levels. We started from an existing strategic transport model, use the model to understand the forecasted freight traffic conditions in future years, such as the routes they are taking, trip lengths of the journeys, speed and journey times, then set out a range of scenarios based on the market penetration levels to see what the environmental impact would be if X percentage of the vehicle mileage are electrified. We have conducted a review of available traffic models from every FREVUE cities. However, only London and Amsterdam have such model available, and were able to provide the model to us. So this analysis is only done for those 2 cities. And the third level analysis is impact monetization. The idea is to, based on the results from level 2 analysis, then we use some of the existing methodologies and studies on the evaluation of change in air quality and greenhouse gas emission to quantify the impact. So this really depends on data availabilities and previous studies on some of the key parameters. So based on the data and tools that were available to us at the time of analysis, so this is carried out for London only. So this slide really presents the results from the direct impact on local air pollution. This is based on, in total, 104 vehicles running in 8 FREVUE cities for a period from a few months to up to 2 years. In total, we have collected vehicle operation data for over 700,000 kilometers. And the results are analyzed using the Corporate 4 software. I'm not going to read the results on the slides, as you can see it for yourself, but it basically shows that the benefits of running electric-free vehicles are directly linked to the type of conventional internal combustion engine vehicles replaced. So the older the vehicles, the larger the benefit. As the vehicle emission control technology improves, the benefits become much smaller. I should also say that the results shown here are based on exhaust emissions only. We assume the brake and tire wear related emissions are similar because the vehicles are like-for-like replacement. So overall, the NOx saving from FREVUE demonstrations is equivalent to the total road transport NOx emissions in the City of London for 3 days in 2013. Similarly, for the PM saving, it is equivalent to the total road transport PM emissions in the City of London for 2 days in 2013. For the greenhouse gas impact estimations, the analysis is carried out at both local level or the exhaust level, as well as total level, using well-to-wheel analysis to take account the emissions during electricity generation and transmission. So in total, the FREVUE project has led to a total greenhouse gas emission savings of approximately 45%, and it is equivalent to the total transport greenhouse gas emission in the City of London for about 1 day in 2013. We also observed large variations in well-to-wheel emission reduction at different cities, ranging from 10% to over 90%. We think this is strongly linked to the carbon intensity at local grid. For example, the carbon intensity of UK's power network is over 30 times more than the Norway's electrical grid. However, as the greenhouse gas savings, we think is going to be increasing in futures as the power sector is gradually decarbonized. In fact, the EU has set a target for the power sector to be CO2 emission free in 2050. And of course, there are other factors, assumptions also affect the calculated savings. These include average load, road gradient, fleet composition, and weather conditions, for example. We do not have detailed data for these parameters, since assumptions have to be made. So there is a level of uncertainties in these calculations. For level 2 analysis, there are 4 factors which we consider are very important for the environmental impact. These include the future predicted light goods vehicle and heavy goods vehicle flows and speed, which are used to calculate emissions, and also trip length distributions from the goods vehicle, which is to make sure the range can be satisfied by existing electric fleet vehicle capabilities, and also the predicted fleet composition forecast, for example, to understand what percentage of vehicle mileage were done by Euro 5 or Euro 6 vehicles, and then finally the EFV penetration levels. So the first 2 factors can be obtained from the traffic models, and the fleet composition forecast can be obtained from the government agencies published data. In our case, we use the data published by DEFRA, Department for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs in the UK. And the EFV penetration levels are set out as our analysis scenarios. This will be discussed later separately. So the analysis dimensions include NOx, PM, and greenhouse gas emissions. Tools used are traffic models, include the Lohan model from the Transport for London, and the VMA traffic model from the city of Amsterdam. At the bottom right corner, I attached a plot from the Lohan model in London, and also a zoomed in plot for the London area. So as can be seen, it's a very detailed model for the Greater London area. The following slide actually are based on this London model as an example. This slide on the upper side basically shows the distribution of light goods vehicle and heavy goods vehicle traffic for the forecast year 2021 morning peak period. So the black lines are the road networks, and the green lines are traffic flows, and its thickness are proportionate to the level of forecasted traffic flow. These two plots basically telling us that they have very different spatial distributions. So, for example, the plot on the left shows the light goods vehicle traffic penetrates deeply into the local network in the London area, where the population density is very high, whereas the HGV or heavy goods vehicle traffic, they concentrated around motorways or major roads in London. So this brings the question whether the health impact might be bigger by electrifying similar mileage of light goods vehicles compared to heavy goods vehicles. Thomas, could you bring the previous slide, please? Yes, the slides on the lower side show the distribution of the length of trips from light goods vehicle and heavy goods traffic. Heavy goods vehicle traffic in the Greater London area for the forecast year 2021 in the morning peak period. So these two plots are basically telling us that most of the trip lengths from freight traffic in 2021 morning peaks are below 100 kilometers, which is within the range of electric freight vehicles that has been deployed on the FREVUE project. Yes. For this slide, as discussed earlier, the type of vehicle emission technologies they directly affect the environmental benefits result. So for future fleet composition forecasts, we use the forecast provided by DEFRA directly. Basically, this show, for example, in the year 2021 for the light goods vehicle, is predicted that 6% of the vehicle are still Euro 4, and 23% will be Euro 5, and 71% will be Euro 6. Use these figures, we can then calculate road transport emissions. So for this analysis, we set out 3 uptick scenarios, including low, medium, and high, which means 10%, 50%, and 100% of the freight traffic are electrified respectively. So results show that for the low penetration scenario in the year 2021, there will be NOx reduction around 400 tons, PM reduction of 3.8 tons, and local greenhouse gas savings just below 300 tons in London. For the forecast year 2031, under high penetration scenario, the environmental benefit, as can be seen, are much bigger. So the results basically show that even a small percentage change of electric freight vehicle penetration level can lead to significant environmental benefit. In addition, this analysis also provides input to level 3 analysis to monetize the impact. So for impact monetization, there are many different methodologies. We use the approach set out in the Department for Transport Appraisal Guidance. It's also called WebTech. It's well known by the transport communities here in the UK. So it's basically implement a hybrid approach, include the damage cost, which are basically calculated primarily on the health impact of air pollutants, and abatement cost, which they represent the indicative cost of additional abatement effort that will be required to comply with legal obligations if the scheme were to go ahead. Or in our case, the savings from the reduced abatement effort because the scheme results in an improvement. So therefore, the abatement cost approach helps the delivery of legal air quality obligations by reflecting the need to deliver obligation and the costs associated with rectifying any breach. So the dimension of analysis include NOx, PM, and greenhouse gas emissions, and the tools used are available on the WebTech website. So for the results, the top left plot are the valuations of NOx savings in 2021 with low penetration scenarios. So the y-axis are valuations discounted to 2017 price, while for the x-axis, low, medium, and high values represent uncertainties around the potential time lag between a change in air quality and health impact. They ranging from a 0 lag, that's for the high values, to a 40-year lag, that's for the low value. So as for 2021, there are also very large abatement costs. But for the year 2031, which is the plot on the bottom right corner, the abatement cost is 0. Well, this is because the way how abatement cost is calculated, it is directly affected by the number of road links which exceeds the EU limit. So a large number of links are forecast to have exceedance of EU limits in 2021, hence the abatement cost in that year is very high. But then in year 2031, it is forecast that all the links in London road network will be under the EU limits. So this abatement cost will be 0. For the okay, this is the result for the greenhouse gas emission savings. As you can see, for the in year 2021 with 10% penetration levels, the total benefit would be around £7 million. So in total, if you combine the benefits from air quality and also the greenhouse gas emission benefit, the total event benefits in year 2021 with low penetration scenario would come to close to about £900 million, which is very significant. But we also need to recognize that there are, however, very substantial uncertainties in these cost estimates due to the significant uncertainties regarding the lags between actions and the effect. Also, it's never really easy to forecast traffic flow in 10 or 20 years' time, well, let alone the emissions from the forecasted traffic. So, for example, any emergence of new policies or disruptive technology will likely to affect the result. So we need to be careful when interpret the result, but we also think this is a very valuable work to show the potential benefit that electrifying urban logistics can bring to our society. Okay, to sum up, the freight sector makes considerable contributions to air pollution and greenhouse gas emissions. And the proportion of freight traffic has been increasing in total road traffic, and it brings challenge on how to reduce their environmental impact and improve its efficiency. Our FREVUE analysis has shown that those electric-free vehicles offer scope for substantial improvements in air quality and reductions in greenhouse gas savings, both at the direct level and at the wider uptake level. These improvements can be translated to substantial economic savings in direct damage and abatement costs. But we need to recognize the uncertainties in these cost estimates. Okay, so I think that's all for my presentations. I don't know whether Tanja has anything to say from the local partners' perspective, or if there's any questions from the audience, I'll be happy to answer.
So, from my point of view, thank you very much, Yanjie. I think this is obviously very valuable work, and we see that on the London side. So, on the one hand, it facilitates discussions with fleet managers and operators, as we knew beforehand that there were no tailpipe emissions, but this now provides an evidence base that facilitates our discussions with the fleet managers and operators, but also their internal discussions, and to now also have some evidence base for the CO2 emission reduction potential, which, as Yanjie mentioned, is only going to increase as we are decarbonising our power sector. So at the moment, it largely depends on the country, but it's potentially significant. So that's very important. And on the other hand, to have some monetary values, and even though Yanjie stresses, and I agree with that, that there are significant uncertainties around that, as always when you do this kind of analysis, again, it still provides an important base for discussion, in the sense that, as I mentioned in my introduction, we still need to support the uptake of these vehicles if we want to see them on the road, especially the larger ones in the future. Now, that support might look expensive, but if we look at the expense of not doing anything and not supporting these vehicles, suddenly it looks less expensive than that. So I think this is very valuable work, and we are very thankful for Imperial for doing that.
Thank you very much, Yanjie and Tanja, for both your very complete answers and for your answers to Yanjie presentation. So far, we don't have any question from the public, so you can all ask questions for Yanjie or Tanja. You can simply type your question in the chat box. Or if you want to, you can also indicate that you have a question, and I can give you the floor, and you can ask your question directly to either Tanja or Yanjie. I have myself a question while we are waiting for questions from participants. It's for both maybe Tanja and Yanjie. I was wondering how, the fact that the vehicles are emitting nothing and are quiet, how does the public on site did react to these vehicles? Did you have good reaction from the side of the public and also from the drivers and the shops which received goods from these FREVUE vehicles?
Yanjie, do you want to take that based on your analysis?
Yeah, of course. Yes, to answer that, we have we have another task, basically to study the attitudinal impact from deploying electric freight vehicles. So we have conducted survey on 6 different groups. Those include the drivers, fleet operators, the depot managers, the customers, including senders and receivers, and the transport network managers and grid managers. So I think to answer your question on the public, well, we haven't done any survey on the public, but on the senders and receivers of the users. I think overall it's been really positive. From our analysis, show that most of the customers, they are fully aware of the environmental issues that are facing them every day. But the problem for them is a lot of time they don't know whether their parcels are being delivered by a conventional diesel trucks or buy zero-emission electric trucks. So that's the problem. Although they are very happy with the initiatives, but I think there's still a lack of visibility to the customers. For the drivers, they are all very happy. Although at the beginning of the project, they were very susceptible about the new vehicle, about their capabilities, the range. But I think at the end of the project, most of the drivers are very happy with the vehicles. There is a reduce of workloads for the drivers because they don't need to operate the gear or the clutch anymore. And also there's much less noise and pollutions within the cabin. The only thing I would say is the range anxiety. Although I think for vast majority of the operators, the drivers don't have any issues with range anxiety because their routes are fixed, and most of the operators, they leave very healthy margins for the vehicles. So the drivers are very confident that their vehicles are able to cope with the demands of the delivery. But there are a small percentage of drivers where the delivery routes are changing every day, or they have to charge their vehicles between delivery stops. Then there might be some issues for the range anxiety, especially there is performance variations in winter months as well for that. But in general, I think the feedback has been really positive.
Okay, thank you, Yanjie. We have a few questions on the chat. The first one asked by Jonas Oderman, who asked, was the impact of vehicle-related noise evaluated? I guess that's what you just described, but do we have some data?
You mean the noise?
Yeah, on the noise.
Noise to the drivers or the noise to the residents?
I think in general.
In general, we don't have any data for the noise impacts, and also it's not actually very feasible to collect any data because for all the 8 cities we only have 100 vehicles. Well, if you put it in a real operational environment, there's no way you can tell the difference one or handful of vehicles can make. But I think in the report, we have reviewed these issues, and we have reviewed a number of research on the noise from the electric trucks. I think in general, there's a speed threshold. Because there are 2 types of noise. One is the engine noise, and another is the noise from vibrations from the tire and the brake. So for the low speed environment, in general, the speed is below 30 kilometers per hour. The noise benefit is very significant by using electric vehicles. But then as the speed increase to a much higher level, say 50 kilometers per hour, 60 kilometers per hour, then the road noise really take over the engine noise. So the difference is really minimum. And also, when there's another question: how do you evaluate the noise impact? It's really there are many different factors. Depends on the distance from the residential locations to the roads and any obstacles between the way. We reviewed this kind of things in the report, but we wouldn't be able to do any quantitative analysis on this.
Okay, thank you, Yanjie. Another question from Dennis Onkanen. It's about the graphs that you showed in your presentation, and the question is: the graphs show the average trip distance distribution, but is there any data on average number of trips per day or average range per day, and related to that, the retiming of goods transport? I guess that relates to these.
Yes, yes, that's right. Well, these plots are extracted from a traffic model that are developed and maintained by the Transport Department, in this case, the Transport for London, and also the City of Amsterdam. so I think if I discuss this in detail, this will be become another webinar. But what's basically presented here is the distribution of each trips that is made by the light goods vehicle or heavy goods vehicle. But there is a drawback in this because in these models, it's not possible to model tours. So the trips are treated separately. So if a vehicle doing multiple drops a day, then they will be treated as multiple trips. We won't be able to connect them together as a tour because this kind of information is simply not available in this type of model. I hope that answers the question. But then I think we have done the surveys as well on the operators and also analysis on traffic models. I think for the most logistic operations, the existing range capabilities from the vehicles deployed on the FREVUE project is actually good enough for a high percentage of the delivery requirements.
Okay, thank you, Yanjie. I have another question, quite technical for you. It's about the relationship between the emitted CO2, NOx, and PM in kilograms or tons, and the savings in pounds. So, is the relationship between those emission and savings in pounds, are they linear?
Linear.
Linear.
I think there are many factors to consider when you calculate the benefit. I don't think it's probably not beneficial for me to go into very detailed discussion on this topic, but I'm really happy to provide my email address on this. So we can have a detailed discussion on this topic because there are really many factors affecting the economic benefit. Because, for example, the electricity price and the inflation and a range of factors. But I'm happy to have a discussion after the webinar, if that's okay.
Yes, indeed. And the same person asked if the results are published so that they can see the numbers. I think that part of the numbers are already available on our website in some publications and also on our brochure. Some fact sheets will be made soon, and I think also that the deliverables, the technical deliverable, as soon as it will be accepted, will be published online on our website, as all the FREVUE results. Then I go to the next question by Sarah Finn, who asks if the maintenance costs and the training costs for the mechanics have been assessed. I think that is something for the webinar of tomorrow about the economics of electric freight vehicles. So I invite all of you to join our third webinar tomorrow afternoon, where this will be discussed in details.
Thomas, do you still want me to say something quickly on that?
Yes, sure, of course.
Just in case that Sarah is not able to join tomorrow, just a brief answer on that. The training costs have not been assessed. In terms of maintenance costs, we normally say that the savings in maintenance cost is around 30 to 35%, simply because the electric vehicles are much simpler machines and have less moving parts. Now that might be conservative, the 30 to 35%. There's some calculations done at the moment, for example, in London as part of the Low City program, and especially for the large trucks, they come up with much higher savings. As the project, I mean, we think that 4.5 years is a long project, but it's still not taking into account the entire lifespan of the vehicle. So we can't provide any kind of comprehensive figures on the maintenance cost savings, but it is significant. So 30 to 35% is conservative. But then again, it will depend very much on your vehicle supplier as well as your location. Your maintenance arrangement with your vehicle supplier is very important to actually get to those savings.
Okay, thank you, Tanja, for answering this question. I move now to the next question by Martina Wikström. It's about the different areas that are impacted by the reduction of emissions. So the question is, have the cities communicated their cost estimation for other policy areas? The environmental and transport department at the cities normally comply to this analysis, but the benefits spill over on other policy areas such as education or health. And are these policy areas willing to contribute? I think, Yanjie, the question is, did you consider also the benefits and the monetized benefits for other policies?
Not really. So our focus has really to monetize the, for example, greenhouse gas savings and the reduction of air pollutants. We didn't really look at the other policy areas. Tanja, do you know whether TNO has done any work on that?
No, we haven't done work on that as yet. I think it's these figures, these results that Yanjie just presented are clearly quite new. So now it's very much up to the various cities within FREVUE, but also the phase 2 cities and others to actually take this forward and to take this to the various departments. I do agree that we always have to work in silos and not share these results with other departments, and that is absolutely essential.
Okay. We have another couple of questions. The first one submitted by Octavio Zamudio Lopez. It's for the LCA. Are you considering the disposal of the batteries? Are you measuring the decay of battery capacity?
I think this is really a question for TNOs to answer tomorrow. For our analysis, we didn't really look at the batteries. We only focused on the reduction of air pollutants and the greenhouse gas emissions.
Yes, indeed. I think that is something that will be indeed answered tomorrow in the webinar tomorrow afternoon. So I invite once again all of you to attend this webinar. And the last question by Thiago Cruz. The variation of the question is about the variation of the results in different cities with different climate. So is the variation of the results significant when you consider cities in the north of Europe with moderate climate like London and Amsterdam with other cities in the south of Europe like Lisbon?
I think the benefits it's really depends on the amount of electricity has been consumed during the delivery. So, for example, in a hot climate, maybe the drivers will use the air conditioning more, hence consume more electricity. So, if, for example, in Lisbon, the local grid, the carbon intensity in Lisbon's grid is high, then of course the benefits will be less because you consume more electricity than the electricity. To generate electricity, you also emit a lot of the greenhouse gas. But the point I made in my presentation is that the power sector has been gradually decarbonized. and also the EU has set up the target for the power sector to be carbon neutral in 2050. So I think in future the differences will become smaller, much smaller. But for now, yes, I agree with you. The differences can be quite big between cities. That's mainly because of the carbon intensity of the local grid.
Thank you, Yanjie. So I think now that we have responded answered to all the questions that were asked, and we are approaching the end of our webinar. So I would like to thank you, Tanja and Yanjie, once again for your good presentations and for your answers to the questions. Before we close this webinar, I would like to invite you to our third and last FREVUE webinar, which will take place tomorrow. That will be about the economics of electric vehicles, with a presentation by another research partner of FREVUE, TNO, based in the Netherlands, and the webinar will take place from 3 to 4. So feel welcome to join this webinar. I would like also to thank all the participants for joining the webinar today, and I wish you all a very good day and a very good week. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Thank you. Goodbye.